Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow if you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know like to come on the show and have a chat with me, you can find me on your social media platform of choice because I'm there. If you go to isaacr11.com, you'll see a link to all of them. All right, with that out of the way, I'm looking forward to this. We were chatting a little bit before we got started about all sorts of different things. I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. So today, my guest is Courtney Yatteau. Courtney, do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, definitely. Hi. Yeah, thank you for having me, Isaac. Yeah, I am Courtney Yatteau, and I am a developer advocate at Esri. And so, yeah, I've been there for a little over 3.5 years. So I started in 2022. And yeah, I get to do lots of all sorts of fun things. I get to create like talks and demos, and do community engagement. And I get to spend time with like playing with our developer tools, listening to our software and product engineers and how they're building our SDKs and APIs, and then getting to expose that to the world. So
Awesome. I mean, it's always good talking to somebody who cares about developers, because I
hmm
think, especially in this world today, a lot of people are thinking about like, what does a developer mean these days? Um, I'd love to start off my conversation with, how it got started for you. Like, when did you realize that technology kind of was the thing that you wanted to have as a career?
yeah, so the it's kind of a long story.
Well, we got time. We
um
got time.
yeah, we have. So I can take it. I guess I'll start with kind of how I got into Esri, but then I'll have to back it up from there quite a bit. So I back in 2020, I was teaching, and I'll get way more into that in a little bit. But I was teaching virtually because schools had all shut down and everything, and they decided to chunk the school day like way short. All of that. It was like, okay, I had a ton more time at my hands, like a lot of us did during that time. So I started kind of just dabbling in web development. I was like, this seems interesting. I've never actually tried to do this before. So yeah, I signed up for an online course. I believe that one was called New Camp. It was like a very affordable option to be able to learn just the intro to web development. And I just fell in love with it. It was awesome. Just being able to, I really like the visual side of things, so I was way more into the front end. Um, so I was just like falling in love with learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then React, and building my own applications, and getting to just like, yeah, work on different projects and things. So it was a lot of fun for sure. So that's like that kind of start. I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to elaborate on any of that
Yeah, I mean,
first.
I think, I think one of the things that I find fascinating, especially depending on like how you got into tech, or
hmm
like what time frame you got into tech is, it's I think there's kind of like
Yeah.
tropes, right? Like for instance, for me, like I started tech like so like I graduated high school in 2004 for aging myself.
hmm
But like so I was very much introduced to like the web. So like like MySpace pages and CSS and
Yeah.
HTML and JavaScript and all this sort of stuff. And obviously, some people that are older than me, they got computers that they had to build and or the CDs in the mail and that sort of
Right.
stuff. And then there's people that were after me and they did, coding boot camps. They learned kind of JavaScript frameworks to start out like. And I think my question for you is like, when do you remember like the first thing that you actually built, like the first project that you had or the first program that you had to create?
Mhm. Yeah, well, okay, so this is going to be a little contradictory because technically I had built several other programs before, like little small
Sure.
programs before I got into web development stuff, but that's the side convers or the other conversation we'll have soon. But yeah, so in terms of when I started learning web dev, yeah, it was a fun Pokemon project that I built,
Nice.
just pulling in, all the API data and
Was
displaying it on the
was
screen.
like a
So.
like kind of
Mhm.
like a Rolodex sort of thing. It's like, oh, like,
Like a Pokedex.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's funny
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people's first introductory to like the web is like, oh, I have, similar to like in the real world where it's like I have some data, like let me just show some cool ways to like display
hmm
it, right? So you learn a little bit about how to properly like I guess organize information because I think that's a big
Yeah.
um what's the best way to phrase this? I think that there's a lot of things to learn for like good and bad
hmm
ways to organize data like on a web page. Sometimes you see
Yeah.
a bad implementation of it and you're like, oh, gross. And then sometimes you see a good and then you kind of steal that idea.
Yeah.
So you kind of hinted a little bit at that. So what did you do before you got like went through that coding boot camp sort of experience?
Mhm. Okay, yeah. So I actually, I'll say, okay, I graduated high school in 2008, so not too much longer after you.
Sure.
But I didn't really have any exposure to computers that much in school, other than, oh, here's like a course to learn typing
Sure.
and, Word and all this basic stuff. Yeah. So, and I know that some of my friends had different experiences at different schools, but I want to say for the most part, it just wasn't really a big thing. And even when I started teaching, which is what I'm getting to, it wasn't yet then either. But anyway, so I graduated high school and then I fell in love with mathematics, actually starting probably by middle school. But once I had an amazing teacher in my ninth grade year and then my 11th grade year who taught me Algebra 2 and then AP Calculus. And so I just was like, you know what? I want to be like her. So I just decided I was going to be a math teacher. So I went to undergrad for, yeah, math. And I graduated and then I became a math teacher. And during my math courses, there were a couple of courses that required us to use MATLAB. And that was something that I had no exposure to. They did not teach us any kind of fundamentals of computer science or, programming or anything. So it was kind of like just, hey, math, you can figure this
Sure.
out. I was like, what? What is happening here? Like, I did not know anything about I mean, I knew what a variable was in a math context, but
Yeah.
not, in like, I knew the ideas of like things like conditionals and whatever, but I did not understand them in the context of a computer,
Sure.
or any kind of language like that. So anyway, so I remember struggling through it, but like thinking it was really cool once I got it to work, once
Yeah.
I got these different like things to work, and showing off the different, yeah, just solving different mathematical problems with it. Anyways, so I say all of that to say, when I graduated and I was looking for a teaching job, there I came across a school that was looking for a math teacher, but they also were looking for someone who may have a little bit of CS experience. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, huh, well, I don't know if it really counts or not, but I'm going to elaborate on my experience anyway. So I guess it was enough because they hired me.
Nice.
And yeah, I started, it was a brand new course to the school. It was still pretty new to Virginia too. Just for context, I live in Virginia and I started teaching, yeah, in Southwest Virginia, technically. So it was, I want to say it was introduced to the school system in Virginia in like 2009. And then, so this was like 2012 when I started teaching it. It was called computer math. So it was supposed to be technically a math course, but it was supposed to introduce the students to computer science concepts,
Sure.
through mathematical contexts. Um, anyways, so first year teacher, brand new course to the school, so I couldn't rely on like teachers' old
Yeah. Nope.
lesson plans or anything
Sure.
like
Yeah.
that. Um, and not only that, but it was, still very new to Virginia. So I'm like going online trying to find all sorts of any kind of things I could do to start to build this course together. And there was very, very limited any kind of like documentation on really what I was even supposed to be teaching. There was like a few pages that VDOE had shown us, the
Yeah.
Virginia Department of Education. um, okay, so there's that. But then also my school system was like, oh, by the way, we do have a computer lab, but you can't be in there like every day, maybe once a week, because you gotta sign up for it, and other teachers need to use it, and blah blah blah. I mean, and this was 2012, so
Sure.
it wasn't
Sure.
like every kid had a laptop yet or anything. So I'm like, okay, so I have to teach a computer science-ish course with computers only maybe once a week. What am I going to do
Mm,
the rest of the 4 days a
yeah.
week,
Figure it out.
Um, yeah, so I landed on the tool that was in my classroom already for the kids, which were calculators. So
Mm,
we started programming in TI Basic, and that's how I built the course, was all around that. And I remember it was funny because I remember playing around with my calculator and the programming interface and everything when I was in high school
yeah.
even, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of putting in notes, like cheating like you do kind
Yeah, exactly.
of,
When I think about
yeah,
calculators, like in high school, I'm like, oh, like that. Basically, I could put like you said, notes in there. I could
yeah.
solve matrix equations in like 15 seconds, like instead of having to do them by hand. Yeah, I interrupted you. Go ahead and finish your story.
No, you're good. No, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it was just like I think that's kind of it's been a while now, obviously, since I had this kind of idea that happened to me. But I think just the realization of, hey, you know what, this is simple enough. Like I can teach myself this because I didn't know TI basic either.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I can teach myself this quickly enough to then teach to the kids. Mind you, this was like a week and a half before school actually was starting when I started building the curriculum. So that was fun. Um, but yeah, and also it was not a course that was meant to be very challenging by any means, which added another level of difficulty to the classroom setting because it was actually a course that was, I want to say, now I'm not, don't quote me on this, but I want to say it was kind of designed to help get students an extra math credit if they needed it
Sure. Yeah.
that weren't necessarily able to go to say algebra 2 and things
Yeah.
kids that struggled. So those are the kind of kids that I had mostly in that classroom. There were some one-offs that were thought it just sounded interesting, but a lot of it was like, I hate math. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Whatever. But then once I showed them what we were actually going to be learning, it was hardly any math. It was getting your calculator to solve math equations for you and, learning these different programming patterns and things. Um, it ended up being fairly successful, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's like,
Mhm.
I could just think about the challenges that would exist in like, first off, you're having to learn something else. And I'm very much a subscriber is you only need to be like one step ahead of the people that you're teaching. Like,
Yeah.
because I think that, if you learn along with somebody, like you kind of take some of the things that you're challenged with learning and figuring out how to relay in a way that's a bit better. I'm curious about the math thing too. Like, obviously, there are deep correlations between mathematics and computer science. Like, that's not something that anybody would disagree with. But I'm generally
Mhm.
curious. It's like, when you were going about learning programming, like, what are some of the things that you immediately picked up on were like, "Oh, this is a math thing," and what are some of the things that you as you were going through your learning, you're like, "Oh, this is not math at all, and this is, like, something completely different to how my brain works?"
Hmm. Good question. I will say I remember connecting the dots with like different numerical systems. So like I was required to teach, say, Boolean values,
Yeah,
and then yeah, other different types of systems to the students and relate it to computer science in
yeah,
some ways, but like at a very just high level, nothing too crazy. Um, so yeah, I think I know the students definitely thought that was very interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, doing things like making the connection between things like the summation symbol and like how you would actually program that with
yeah,
different types of conditionals and things too, like that was kind of cool to see that, like for loops and other things. So yeah, I mean, and then visually too, I mean, there's so many different things like, and you couldn't really do it as well on calculator because you
sure.
had just the graphing interface, right? But visually with like JavaScript, you're able to do so much on the canvas to visualize things like sine waves, and the unit circle and so many other things. Um, so yeah, I think there's lots of different things
Yeah.
that.
No, it's funny that you mentioned kind of like the transition between, taking like mathematical principles and turning it into programming. Like, did you ever think about going down the path? Because there's a whole area of study where it's like math computer science curriculums like in universities, right?
Mm,
Like, is that something that ever interested you? Like you talked about like building like sines or tangents or cosines or trying to solve like complex formulas like using web interfaces. Is that something that ever interested you,
mhm,
or were you more interested in kind of the more fun things that you were kind of referring to, like you made a Pokédex or making a cool
mhm.
looking website? That like the creativity part that interested you more than sort of like I guess the
Yeah.
more traditional math route.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yes, I will say I never had too much of an interest to go like super deep with it
Yeah.
in terms of maybe at the university level or higher. I just, yeah, I always thought it was really cool to visualize things that I already knew about mathematics. And then I mean, a lot of what my passion is getting others to
Hmm.
understand things, right? It's really at the core of, my teacher like brain and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, so it's definitely more of doing whatever you can to inspire people to try out new things and see the cool visuals. So yeah, at a personal level, I mean, I have not done that kind of stuff with that very technical,
Sure.
say, crossing the two. It's definitely more of I see a bit of crossover, but I haven't done a lot of exploring of it myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I have I know they're very much intertwined,
Yeah.
but I don't have a lot of that connection that I've explored myself.
Yeah.
I've done kind of just the crossover of like, okay, I took what I did as a teacher and now I do it with mostly like
Yeah.
JavaScript and web dev stuff on the side.
Well, I
So
think that's
yeah.
something interesting to talk about too, right? Because I think a lot of people that are in developer relations kind of have this itch. It is to kind of like,
Mhm.
teach the next generation or teach peers on how to do concepts that you find interesting and you're passionate about, right? I think that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
whole reason why Dev really exists, or people are interested in doing it. So, that whether that's creating content or whether that's talking with developers or speaking at conferences, right? I guess my question is like, obviously you got into teaching, which I
Mhm.
think you need that itch to begin with. But when did you realize, quite frankly, that you're like, I really, really like teaching computers? Like, so I like it more than actually just like teaching like in a traditional like academic perspective, right? In a high school or a university or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like I very much more like the mediums that DevRel or tech jobs sort of provided for me.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 that's a good question. So that takes me to the next like kind of portion that I did in my teaching career, which was when I moved up to Northern Virginia. I started teaching at a school where I was teaching basically like AP computer science. And that allowed me to then, start. I was self-taught in the Java language, and I was very much having to be like, a few steps ahead of the kids
Sure.
because it was AP, right? But once I started to get the hang of that, I was like, okay, well, I can keep going. And like, I was really starting to try to take some of the material and like challenge the students in different ways that were maybe even beyond the curriculum a little bit, especially the ones that were more advanced. And so as I was doing that, I was like learning and learning more. And I'm like, as teaching it and presenting it to the students, there were so many times where my students would say things like, why don't you actually go into tech yourself? Like
Yeah.
they've actually asked me that before. And I was like, you know what? I also taught math. Like every year I was teaching like 3 or 4 different courses. So I
Mm.
was still teaching mathematics in my background. And I actually in between that time frame, I had gotten a master's in math education as well. So it was like definitely not at the forefront of what I was doing every day. It was just like part of my passion, was, introducing kids to computer science and everything. But yeah, so I started to really actually consider thinking about that. I was like, well, okay, what would I do though? Like, would I really want to be a traditional like software engineer? What would I want to do? And that's when I started looking into web development because I wasn't teaching that, right? I was teaching just Java. Um, and so once I saw that creative outlet, and then I started watching YouTube videos of people, teaching the different concepts, and I'm like, I think that'd be cool. I could probably do something like that. It just kind of all layered until I ended up taking a second bootcamp course that was a bit more intensive. And that one, they gave me, I guess, the confidence to start actually applying to jobs. So when I was doing that, I that's when I came across developer relations.
Yeah.
I had never heard of it, right? Yeah, so I think it was very much it was kind of slow. So it wasn't just like, hey, I want to get into tech.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. It was more like I'm going to dabble and see if maybe I can find a space somewhere. Um, and yeah, because I wasn't 100% sure even up to the a few weeks before I quit teaching, which was like beginning of the 2022 2023 year. I wasn't even 100% sure if I was gonna
Yeah,
switch yet. It definitely took the right job and opportunity to be like, yeah, I think I can do this. So it's really developer relations is what helped me transition into it. And now I'm like, I could probably do a traditional software engineering role, I think,
sure,
but I don't know if I'd really want
sure,
to.
yeah,
Because I work with them all the time, and I
yeah,
see what they're doing, and I'm like, this is great work, but I'm having fun doing what I'm
yeah.
doing by getting to show off your work.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
mean, it's funny. DevRel is one of those jobs that you don't know it exists until like you see it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
very much, especially like if you're not in tech, like if you're outside of tech, like, when I started doing these sort of jobs, like I would tell people ask me like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, like, I go and I write blogs or I create videos or I'll speak at conferences." And they're like, "What? That's a job?" Like, there's people like
Yeah.
at these tech companies that's their job is to like just like do
Hmm.
stuff, like they're not writing code or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
like it's very, very hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I think the immediate correlation that people have is like teaching. People immediately are
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, so it's basically the equivalent of like a college professor, but they work at a tech company. I'm like,
Yeah.
somewhat, yeah. I mean, I think that's a gross exaggeration, but I think that there's still like this need or this want to get people excited about doing things. And that's like what teaching is,
Hmm.
right? Like, you have people that are from all walks of life, and some people, they are very excited about what they're being taught, and there's some people that are less excited. And your goal is to get everybody, at least to some point, where they're excited enough or interested enough to do well. And I think
Yeah.
um, that's always fascinates me about DevRel is that it's just one of those jobs that and you have like all these preconceived notions like when you start the job, like this is what I'm gonna be doing, then you actually start doing the job and it's substantially different, right? Like,
Hmm.
what are some of the things when you first started like working in developer relations, assumptions that you might have made about what the job would be versus like what the job actually was when you started?
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, my initial thoughts were, okay, I'm going to time to learn all of this technology, obviously.
Hmm.
I had a whole, well, the company that I work for is geospatial, so GIS, right? And so I had no mapping GIS background at all. So that was a jump for sure of like, I need the time to learn all of this. But um, I, there was a lot of thoughts in my mind where it was like, okay, I'm going to be creating just like little bits of content, right? Like little demos, maybe some videos and things. And then I'll be honest, I didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing. There was still kind of a lot there that I was like, it sounds like pretty open-ended, kind of I can make it how I want it to be. I can write some blog articles here and there, and oh, I can get on the community forums and like answer questions and things like that. Um, but and certainly doing talks at conferences was a part of like the job description and everything, but it wasn't something that I was totally sure how big that would even be, if it would be much of a part of it. um, but it definitely became quickly a part of it because my second day on the job, they asked me if I would present at one of their conferences in Berlin. And I
Oh,
said, okay. And they're like, yeah, it's in 2 months. Like, mm-hmm. I can do that.
yeah. I mean, that
But
sounds like fun to
yeah.
me. Like, getting
Yeah.
like, I think one of the fun things, I mean, the fun and not fun thing about DevRel, like that people see a lot is like the travel aspect of it. And people immediately
Right.
like, oh, so like you're traveling around the world and you get to go like all these things. And I very much tell people that it's not very glamorous, right? Like
Yeah.
airport lounges and hotel rooms and conference centers, like you see a lot and they all look the same, no matter where you are. And yes, you
Yeah.
might have an opportunity to do a little bit of exploring or whatever, but for the most part, it's a job and you should treat it as a job and not treat it as a vacation. Um,
Yeah.
but it is very funny. Like when I first started doing this work, it's like, oh, okay. And then you start to get like this feeling of like, oh, like I can go and do all these things, and you want to be out there because it's kind of addictive, right? And then you realize
Yeah.
very, very quickly that like, oh, I can't be on the road like 20 weeks a year or 30 weeks a year. That's just
Be
impossible.
like exhausting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think for
Mhm.
you, I'm curious to know like at what point in time when you started working in DevRel, and it could be not yet, where you feel like you kind of have a firm grasp of like how you're successful in the job.
Mm. Yeah, that is hard because that's one thing, what what are your KPIs, in developer
Sure.
relations? Like, what
Yeah,
are you
yeah.
measuring, right? I mean, the number one thing I always hear is, oh, well, that's just vanity stuff. That's just,
Mm,
vanity metrics, the number of views that you had on this or likes or whatever. So I will say I don't feel like I have a total grip on it yet. I don't know if like I feel like other DevRel professionals would agree with me that it's not just there's not a one size fits all
yeah.
solution, I mean, it's going to be different at every company. And it's going to be different in the type of role that you have too. I know some DevRels are very much just focused on specifically the, say, like community space. So they're,
Yeah.
building up the community and that kind of thing, or some are only doing maybe like events and stuff. So since it's just me and one other person at my company that are in developer relations, it's definitely we're kind of just doing a free for all,
Yeah.
and we're kind of just figuring out how it works. And even though it's been a few years now, so I feel like there are definitely times where I felt successful in certain things, right? Um, like after a talk, I get several, questions afterwards, and like good connections are built, and then okay, from there it's the it's other people are building applications based off of fun demos that I built
Yeah.
myself, and it's always like those kind of things are where I feel the most successful is
Sure.
like it's that inspiration. Again, that's like the teacher in me is
Yeah.
where if I can get someone else to do something even more awesome and incredible, then I feel like I did something cool and good
Well,
for the world.
I think it's like it's good mental feedback too. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I've said this to, tens of people, hundreds of people, where it's like, I don't know if I'm ever doing a good job. Like, you're on
Yeah.
stage or you're creating a video. It's like you don't really know. Like, okay, you have a bunch of views, or a lot of people in your conference, like in the session. You don't know if you're doing a good job. And then occasionally you'll see somebody nodding their head and like, okay, maybe that person gets it. The rest of the people don't get it. And then like
Mhm.
afterwards, like you're in the hallway or even right after the talk, and people are just want to have a conversation with you. It might not even be about what your talk is, but it might be something adjacent to it. And then you really
Right.
realize like what the value you bring is, right? And I think to your point about like how each kind of DevRel organization kind of measures success a bit differently, it is quite fascinating that all of it really it is a lot of intangible, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, what are you
Hmm.
bringing to the job that helps, you know, corny enough, like helps developers connect to your company, which,
Yeah.
if you're in the software business or you sell tech in some capacity and you don't really know how to resonate with developers, it's a challenge, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think,
Hmm.
you know, but I think too, like there are things that some people in DevRel enjoy doing and what some people don't. Is there anything in DevRel that you don't really enjoy doing?
Hmm. It's a good question. I mean, there are things I prefer
Sure, that's
doing
a better
for
way to phrase it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know that there's anything I've had to do. I was like, oh, well, okay. I've helped do a bit of documentation here and there, and that's not necessarily exactly a DevRel role thing,
Yeah.
but I think that is kind of lesser on the side of things I would like to do. If I'm going to be writing or creating demos and things, I want to do it in more of the form of a blog writing. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have things I prefer to do. I definitely do prefer to do the content creation and the events pretty equally, I will say. I very much enjoy, I think, the event side of things. It's more of the in-person interactions, right? Um, but then the content creation is fun too, because I get to just come up with all sorts of like fun, crazy things, like my weird ideas I get to just put out there because I can. Like the different I do a video series. I've been doing it each December around Advent time. So I try to like release a video a day or about a day in December. And those are just like, it's like loosely based on some Esri tech. So one year I did it around like the open source library leaflet. We have an Esri leaflet plugin for it. So I was able to just kind of all show off all sorts of fun little things that I was doing with it. Or like last couple of years, I've done, AI powered mapping for the web dev. Um, so I think those are definitely my favorite things to do. And Gosh, there's so many other things I get to do too, though. Like even just getting to work with people internally and learn about all the things that they're doing, and then getting to then show it off. I mean, it's so much fun. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think too, like, I think one of the things, and by the way, for folks that are watching this, like my webcam just completely died. So
Oh no.
it's not turning back on. So my face is frozen, but you can still hear me, so that's all that
Oh
matters.
no.
Yeah, like it was having some issues before, and I just touched it and it's like 1,000 degrees. So I'm guessing it's bad.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's fine. It is what it is. Uh,
Overheating.
um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that there's some in DevRel you get sucked into other things. I think because
Yeah.
it is kind of a this isn't the best way to phrase it. It is somewhat of a catch-all job where it's like, okay, like let's take some of the skills that you have and like really, content and resonating with the developer community and like here's some other things that you can do. And
Yes.
one of the things that, I really enjoy about the job is like the idea like I think you mentioned a little bit like building demos, right? Or building things that people can then use. Like,
Hmm.
I think this probably goes back to when you were a teacher, right? And you had to kind of come up with a lesson plan where,
Hmm.
you basically you had to deliver something and then people had to replicate it. What and
Hmm.
this is probably a question you've been asked a million times, so I apologize. Like is your thought process for how you create content, whether it's, talks or sessions or demos or what have you, is there a lot of shared, I guess, process to what it was when you were actually like teaching proper like math or even like the computer science stuff?
Yeah. There definitely is, and whether I recognize it directly or not, I know there is. People have pointed it out to me. They'll say things like, oh, the way that you presented that, it was so easy for me to understand, even though I don't know anything about it or something like that. So I definitely know that there is crossover, and I do approach the way that I come up with especially my presentations, my talks. I'll approach it in a format where I used to present information as a teacher as well. So there's definitely that. And I always like to, um, the demos that I do show, I like to do, I love doing demos and talks, first of all. And so I love to show off as much as I can that's so visual and then say, hey, here are possible extensions that you could do, or like try to really just like plant seeds. Because I would do that with my students. I would say, here is, once you're done with your work, here is actually, if you want, here's like a bit of a challenge that you might be able to try to do yourself. And that was really fun doing that in my computer science courses. Mathematics, it was still fun, but those, of course, were just more like problem solving for the most part. But yeah, in the AP computer science course that I taught, I remember giving students so many different challenges, like, okay, create a game that does this or something. Of course, now with AI, this was before before ChatGPT even, so I have to totally rethink my entire way of structuring the different challenges. But I'm sure there's certain things I could come up with. But yeah, so it's things like that where I definitely find myself planting seeds and trying to explain things in such a way that as much of anyone can understand. Even if it is a topic that maybe you're not very familiar with. I love to use things like, analogies, and, just real world, actual tangible stories and connections and things, to, yeah, to explain things. So
Yeah,
there definitely is a lot of crossover.
oh, for
Yeah.
sure. I think, and
Hmm.
you bring up a point that's interesting, at least to me, and I've actually been
Hmm.
putting together a talk on this. Like, the
Hmm.
idea of, yeah, I think it's fair to say now that we can augment a lot of content creation with AI, right?
Hmm.
And even like you obviously like writing content and generating demos, but even like videos. Like I was watching an interesting video, like little thing about somebody who's basically created like all of they've created a system that basically creates like voiceover recordings of like screen recordings with AI completely. So like
Yeah.
which and I'd like to get your thoughts, obviously as somebody that's their kind of their job is to create content like that, but also kind of like your thought as like a teacher and like, at
Hmm.
what point in time like do you have to step in and be like, okay, I can have AI help me a lot of the way, but I need to to finish up, or I need to I guess clean the edges. Like when do you like take the wheel, I guess you can say, when you're trying to create something with AI?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I remember I was actually talking to my one of my brothers kind of about this the other day. The time before AI, like I had so many ideas that I would come up with and I would bring them to fruition and in different ways. And then now I'm like, I just go to Gemini or ChatGPT and get the ideas from them. And I'm like, do I even have my own ideas anymore? Or like I'll come up with maybe something, but it's very interesting to see how that's kind of evolved over time. There will be certain things where I'll say, okay, I'm going to really think about this myself first, because I want it to feel as authentic as possible. And then use AI as a tool to kind of help maybe elaborate on things that I may not be thinking about. So I'll give a silly example of like, I love to take our different or any API and use them in like a weird way. So recently I took our static map tile service, which basically is just PNG images of pieces of a map, right? A digital map. And I was playing around with it and I was like, well, okay, this is how the map tiles load on the screen and blah, blah, blah. And I started playing with the endpoint of how there's a different like ZYX value, which is coordinates to directly latitude and longitude. There's a little bit of math there actually that you have to do conversion. But basically, I say all of that to say, I started playing with those individual tiles and realized I can make a game out of this.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
of course, then I used AI to help me like, put together the demo. But it was still very much a thought process of like, hey, I actually, came up with that idea myself, and then I used AI to help implement it. So, um, yeah, it's interesting for sure because I do feel like, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to think this, creativity nowadays is like it's hard because it's like, are you the one coming up with it, or is AI inspiring you and you're kind of coming up with it, or where is it coming from?
Sure.
I don't know. I'm kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here,
No,
but um,
this is great.
yeah, it's interesting for sure. Because
It's
I'm like,
like
I always,
it's kind of
mhm,
like the chicken and the egg, right? Like what comes first,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like if you have an idea, the idea
mhm,
obviously comes from you, but if you just, if that idea turns into a prompt, great. But like, what if that prompt gives you an idea, right? The return of that prompt is like,
yeah,
oh, I actually wasn't thinking about it like this. Let me do it like that, right? Um,
right,
so I mean, it's funny because I've said this a few times in the show already, so I apologize. I had a colleague
mhm,
who was talking about how we need to stop thinking about building software like in a pre-Opus world, where it's like
mm,
since Opus has come out, for folks that might not be paying attention or not as deeply with all of the stuff in AI, like Claude's Opus came out, I think, like during the Christmas time frame in 2025, and
mhm,
it's substantially like it's pretty darn good at generating code and
yeah,
being accurate and being performant and all of that, right? And
right,
like he made a comment about how we need to stop thinking about the writing part of software being limited by time because it's no longer the case,
yeah,
right? um and I was thinking about that from like a content creation perspective. It's like, you know, I think all of us have done this where we vibe code. We had like an idea for an app and we vibe coded it, and it takes a small
mhm,
amount of time, and obviously I'll go in there and I'll take a look at what's actually being done, and like maybe I'll add a little feature here that's like very quick instead of having to just iterate with that. Um, I guess my question for you is like, you know, when you are using AI and when you're like vibe coding something or you're kind of riffing on a demo, like,
mhm,
at what particular point in time are you like, I'm good? Because it's just one prompt
mhm,
away from like adding more and more and more on top of it. And then you kind of
yeah,
overcomplicate things, right? Like,
oh yeah.
when do you decide it's like, okay, I think I'm good here. I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it it I will say it starts kind of in terms of like, what's the goal here? Is it a demo for a short form video, or is it a demo for to show off one specific library in this talk? Or, it's kind of like what is the goal? Because yeah, you could just keep adding and adding to any kind of demo forever and ever and changing the way it looks or changing the way it functions and just adding all sorts of different features and blah blah blah. So I think I've had to definitely get it to the point where I'm like, okay, this is good enough, like clean it up. This is presentable for exactly what I'm trying to show off. You just have to kind of have to limit yourself. Because you just the whole what is the whole goal? What is the whole purpose? Get that across. And I will say there are a lot of times where some of the videos that I've done, I like to walk through actually like live coding it essentially, and you can't do that when it's a giant application, with like tons of JavaScript lines of code and everything. So there are times where I've said, okay, this app feels good, but even this, say, 300 lines of code, I wonder if I could bring it down some a bit, and so I'll even take it back and like simplify some demos sometimes just to, again, get the whole just simple point across. I always like to make things as simple as possible while iterating exactly and what you're trying to show. And yeah, just making sure that the audience understands something to a full value, and not like you don't want to simplify it so much to
Yeah,
where it seems worthless. You don't want to do that,
sure.
but yeah, so uh yeah, it's an interesting process for sure. Because there are some times where I'm like, oh, well, this will just be a fun demo app that I don't need to talk through all the code and I can just keep adding to it. So there are some times where you just have to kind of stop yourself, depending on what it is and what it's for. I mean, there are some side projects that I'm like, oh, I could add this to this. We all have that as developers. Like we have giant lists of ideas of just ways to improve
Yeah.
different applications and stuff. But yeah, so it just depends on the situation, but yeah.
Here's a question for you. Like, are
Mhm.
you are you a bit of a perfectionist when you create content? And the reason why I ask is because I think,
Mm,
especially now that, because as you mentioned earlier, like there isn't anything to stop me from making like the perfect piece of
yeah.
content, right? Um, like I used to get in trouble is not the right word, but I used to get myself in trouble with myself because I would spend too much time doing something, right? Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, like obviously you take pride in what you do. I think we all do. But like at some point in
Mhm.
time you have to recognize I think it's good. Like for you
Yeah.
personally, like when do you feel comfortable like say you're writing a blog post? How many edits do you do? Or how many, oh, like
Mm.
maybe I'll do this one little thing here. Like, how do you reconcile like the perfect demo or the perfect piece of content with like what reality is? Like you can spend hours doing something and probably something's not really gonna notice. Someone's not gonna notice per se.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. And I think so when it comes to it's a little bit different for different situations as well, but I think with blog writing, I know I'm a little less picky in that sense, where it's like, okay, I'm writing the content. I'm just going to say it how it is. I'll do kind of, I try as much to not use AI with that other than like grammar kind of
Sure. Yeah.
fixes and things, because I feel like if you're just getting AI to write a blog for you, what's the point kind of? But
Sure. Yeah.
anyways, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I'll do like maybe a couple passes with it. And, if it's maybe going to go in a more official place, I'll have a colleague or two look over it and that's kind of it. But when it comes to talks and presentations, I have a really bad habit. I need to get better. I have a really bad habit of changing things even like 10 minutes
Oh,
before and just
everybody's
keep
guilty of that.
going.
Everybody's guilty of
I
that.
know.
Like if you're ever
It's so
so
bad.
yeah, if you're at like for people that have not had the opportunity to speak at a conference or at a meetup or whatever,
Mhm.
there's nothing more enjoyable, at least for me, because I'm a bit of a masochist, I guess. Like you're in the speaker room and your talk is like in an hour or 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 6 other speakers that are doing the exact same thing as you. Like they're all like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
updating my slides or trying to get my demo to work or this, and this, and this, working on what I'm actually going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and this is probably, it's very antithesis to how I am as an individual, but like, I think a lot of us kind of get off's not the right word, but like we really are powered by like that rushed feeling. Even though like in
Yeah.
my personal
Yeah.
life, like I remember I was the person who you'd get their homework assignments done like the day they were assigned.
Uh-huh.
So like it's one of those things where now like I need like that little bit of chaos to feel like I'm actually like feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you are somewhat similar? Are you somebody that always used to get stuff done kind of early, or were you kind of more of a procrastinator and get things done and you kind of get off the rush of being in a rush, so to say?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think for the most part, it is more of that kind of I feel like my best work is done when I feel like I'm limited on time. So I feel like I have so much time, then I tend to not actually accomplish much. I'll like start reading about something and then I just go off on a tangent. It's not even really that applicable or something.
Yeah.
Versus when you are have to stay focused, I feel like I'm getting so much done and contributing so much to what's actually going to then be a part of my actual, say, presentation. Um, so yeah, it for the most part, for sure. I don't think I've always been that way. I remember when I was a kid, I also used to actually, I was really big into music. It's not something that really translated into my adulthood, but I played the flute in marching band. I was in middle school, high school, and college. I did band all throughout. And so that it was like I would definitely start practicing like very early on,
Sure.
well before, any kind of presentation stuff. So I was very much like particular about that. But I think it's just a different art form too. So with things like that, music, there's always going to be new kinds of music, but with classical music, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like, oh, this new version of this library just came out and I need to implement it into my demo now,
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
it was like you had a lot more time to practice and like perfect it versus things are just constantly changing in tech.
Yeah,
So
it's I mean,
yeah.
the correlation that you made there is fascinating to me because that's how I feel about math. Like,
Hmm.
and yes, there are people that are still trying to solve the most complex problems and math is changing all the time. But for a layperson like me, like math has been the same for 300 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, so,
Hmm.
and it's funny you're thinking about music where, for a lot of people, music is this completely creative process. But when you, like, to
Hmm.
your point, like classical music is very much, you do not change, like, you know, symphony in E minor, right? You don't change any of
Hmm.
these. You don't change some of these pieces because they were made to a level of perfection that they don't need interpretation, right? And
Yeah.
to your point about tech, this is my thoughts about tech. Like I think, and I've said this a few times, and it's kind of a spicy take. I think that most of the very challenging problems are already solved. Like,
Hmm.
and I think
Hmm.
that we are always on the lookout in tech to find new problems to solve, which isn't a bad thing. But, like when was like I
Yeah.
joke with you, when was the last time you had to like write a sort algorithm? You just don't.
Yeah.
You don't, right?
No.
You don't,
Yeah.
right? So like there are some
No.
things that, to your point are set in stone. But I think that the tooling
Yeah.
is always changing and the demands of tech are changing. So I think,
Yeah.
how do you stay up to speed? Like, you're going to speak at conferences, you're creating your content, you're doing all these things. Like, how do you keep up to date? Not just with what Esri's doing, because I think that's probably a full job in and of itself, right? But also just like
Yeah.
the trends in technology today.
Yeah. I mean, definitely different mediums. So I'll definitely stay up to date with some of the newsletters like TLDR, Dev, and other things. I will social media. I mean, LinkedIn, Blue Sky,
Yeah.
even some still on X. Following all the trends that are happening on there and just seeing what people are talking about. Um, just it is very time consuming though too to constantly being having to stay up to date as much as you can. And I feel like and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, but like I feel like I'm just constantly always behind and like oh, new things are just getting added on top of it. New things are just getting added on my list of this is what I need to learn next, and this is what I need to try to, actually figure out how to do next. And um, but it's very exciting too. Don't get me wrong. Like I
Yeah.
would rather have that, obviously, I than not for sure. But yeah, so I mean, it is a lot of just those kind of things, social media and blog articles, but and like I said, like different newsletters too that point me to these different forms of content too. So videos and blogs and things. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. I remember being a teacher saying, always thinking like I'm a lifelong learner. I'm going to continue learning anything I
Sure.
can. And
Yeah.
in that way, it was more of, okay, I'm expanding the different ways that I'm teaching, different teaching techniques, or in obviously computer science, I was learning it as I was teaching it for a lot of it, and then I was continuing to expand there. Every year I was like, okay, give me like a new course to teach that maybe I haven't yet. I taught for 10 years, so I got to teach almost all the maths, but um, I was very lucky to be able to expand on the CS stuff at least too. So I think I was just like always looking for that, and I was usually getting it. But then now it's very easy to get. It's like overwhelming. So,
Yeah.
in tech. So yeah.
Like
Mhm.
random quick question, like what is your favorite
Mhm.
math to teach?
Oh yeah. What was my favorite math to teach? Oh man.
It's like picking your it's
I
like
do
picking your
remember.
favorite pet or your
Yeah.
favorite kid or whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's hard. Yeah, yeah. Uh, so some of the way that the courses are structured, at least in Virginia, even at different schools, it was a little bit different. So there was like a general core thing of like you've got your basic kind of algebra one, geometry, algebra two. Then after that, it was usually called like pre-calc or it could be trig. And then it was usually calculus. From there, there was like either AP Calc 1 and like AB, BC. Or if you weren't at an AP school, you could teach IB math to teach a bit of two. And then there was different forms of that. Anyways, but so I say all of that to say there was not one specific course that I like teaching maybe, but it was more certain topics that would kind of span across some courses. So I love teaching anything related to trigonometry
Mm.
because I always love to show students like the unit circle and how it actually works. Because I remember being a kid and never really getting it. Even though I did pretty well in like calculus and other things, it wasn't until college that I actually made the true connection of the unit circle and then how the sine wave and cosine wave and how all of these things connected together. So it was always one of my favorite lessons to teach was get them to use pieces of spaghetti and yarn
Yeah.
and actually take it from the unit circle and create it into
Yeah.
these different trig waves. So I would say that for
Yeah.
sure. And then getting to eventually show them all the cool actual real world, applications of trigonometry as
Yeah,
well. So
I always resonate
mm,
with the math that I guess I think you're kind of alluding to. It's like a real world sort of math, right?
mhm.
I struggled a
Yeah.
lot. So like I've joked about this a few times. Like I tapped out at like limits and infinite series sort of math. Like
Okay.
I got to
Hmm.
that and I was like, I can't. Like it's too theoretical. Like my brain doesn't really function this
Yeah.
way. But like geometry, trigonometry, like
Yeah.
the math of nature is like what was really interesting to me because I think you can see it in the real world. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of circle that back to technology, it's like, you know,
Hmm.
what are some of the areas of tech that you see today that you find very interesting? Obviously AI and all that sort of stuff, but like, are there things going on with web frameworks that you're very interested about these days or things that are exciting you? Like what is sort of, powering Courtney to continue to like want to have that learn, process and learn some of the new things that are going on?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, you did say AI, obviously. Agentic AI specifically is something that I need to dive deeper into for sure. I've barely scratched the surface. So I know that's a realm that's like, okay, I'm going to get to that. But and I've been doing talks on this for the last like year or so, and it's been a topic for a long time, but I really want to keep expanding on it with now AI's capabilities of gamification. So
Mm,
it's something that I utilize, in my classroom quite a bit, with just making experiences of learning more fun. So actually using gamified elements in different applications and how that can, motivate people to continue using the app, whether they are learning something or whether they're just using the app for other reasons like purchasing or whatever it may be. So yeah, so adding AI with that is something that I've been doing a lot more research on, and just trying to say like, okay, I've given talks on AI powered gamification, but what about more like AI driven gamification
Mm.
and AI actually getting to, kind of control it and not you just telling it what to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I think that we're getting into this world now, especially where we're trying to figure out implementations that are more um, complex isn't the right word, but I'm gonna use the word complex than just like a
Yeah.
hey, here's a prompt, generate me a program that does this, right? Like, so
Right.
you see like this idea of like something like Fleet or Squad or something like that,
Mhm.
where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
like I have this problem, let me have a bunch of agents, and each agent has a particular responsibility, and they all work together to do this
Right.
thing. Like you're creating mini teams. I'm curious
Yeah.
for like for in your perspective, like you know when we talk about augmenting some of the things that we're doing in tech, like whether it's helping us with our grammar and our blog posts or helping us generate content, you know at least what to you is like what is the eventual outcome of some of this stuff? Like obviously you don't have a
Mhm.
crystal ball, so it's not, I'm not asking for like an exact answer, but like your thoughts is like, you know, how do we continue to march down this path? We're going to be using more and more AI and like typing less and less code. Like, how do you
Yeah.
think that changes like how tech works and how software engineering works, and especially for you, like DevRel works?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that it's wild to think like my first thought is, okay, well, you're always going to need that human form of like a presenter, right? But do you really? Because I mean, there you can create video content like we've mentioned a little bit with, the way that AI is going. It's like it's so easy to even just have it mimic your voice. You don't really hardly even need to do that yourself anymore. Or, I've used different tools that if you're not looking at the screen the whole time, you can force it to like so it's wild. I really don't know how to make predictions on that. But I know that things are definitely moving so quickly, like way quicker than I could have imagined. I don't know. I never even when ChatGPT came out, I wouldn't have imagined that we were in this state now,
Yeah,
which
sure.
is like just wild. But yeah, so I mean, is it that just software engineering? I mean, it's just gonna continue to evolve. And I don't know what it'll look like. It's wild. But I think in DevRel specifically, I think it's just gonna continue to, I think, make my job a bit easier. But there are gonna be certain things where it's gonna be different too. Do people in general even care to consume the kind of content that is being created at a certain level? Will it even matter?
Yeah.
um, so that's hard to say,
Y-
because you think, oh, people are always going to want that human connection, but will they?
Yeah,
I don't
somebody
know.
made a very tongue-in-cheek comment the other day where it's like, we'll have AI generate us content that can be the context for AI to create content in the future, right?
Oh
And
no.
I mean, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
in a practical sense, it's like, are we not just teaching to a different mechanism, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think
Hmm.
that I think there still needs to be a level of conciseness, a level of value, a level of correctness, because
Yeah.
without correctness, I think that none of this stuff is really valuable at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
um that
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
I think that, so I just looked at the time and we're almost out of it, so I want to thank you so much for chatting with me, Courtney. It's been fun to hear about your backstory, and obviously, like, in my opinion, I don't know if you see it like this, a lot of the similarities between being a high school math teacher and being a DevRel professional. I
Yeah.
think, and this
Hmm.
is my last question for you. It's like,
Mhm.
maybe, 5, 10 years down the road, you're like, okay, I like this DevRel thing, but maybe I'm looking for something new. Would you ever go back to
Mm,
teaching?
mm. Yeah, that's a really good
If if
question.
if the if the money was the same, that's a good really, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. If the money was the same,
Sure.
yeah,
Because that is one factor, obviously,
yeah,
of why I switched.
sure,
It oh my goodness. It really depends because there were so many other reasons that I wanted to switch.
sure,
It would have to be the very right opportunity. I mean, there are reasons why I would love to go back to teaching, um, because it was a daily process of getting to
yeah,
actually help and influence children versus now it's like, okay, I still get to do certain things, but it's just not as much of that everyday feedback type thing of getting to see that happen. But so I think ultimately, I don't know that I would, honestly,
hmm,
um, because of everything that I've seen that tech can do. It kind of scares me to think, okay, how am I going to go back and teach children that are growing up in this kind of
yeah,
environment with
yeah,
these tools? I feel like I would have to relearn how I would teach. So
yeah.
that would scare me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I agree. I,
yeah.
I um I spoke at the college that I graduated to. I spoke to like their information systems department, like their student
Mhm.
body. And I was just curious, like what sort of stuff are you learning now? And they're like, "Oh, we're learn
Yeah.
everything we're learning is like security and like data and analytics." Like so they don't care
Mhm.
as much about object-oriented programming or web development.
Yeah.
It's all about like these what do we do with data and how do we keep things secure, which I thought was very interesting
Right.
because you think of those as like not software engineering jobs, right? There's other,
Yeah.
I guess, disciplines in tech for them. But I mean,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think that's what a lot of universities are seeing is like that's the next wave of like the career field that's not going to be as affected by tech or by AI, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is definitely. And I mean, it's just the way that the world is going, like so many different, the way that students are learning all different kinds of fields, it's just changing so much. And so the people actually teaching them have to also evolve. And it's, oh man, yeah, I couldn't imagine being a teacher right now. It would just,
Sure.
like I said, I'd
Yeah.
have to, there's a lot of different things that are, would have to be done, constantly trying to stay up to date with, yeah, what the kids are actually, how they're consuming the content. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy, but
Yeah. But I mean, it's progress. I mean, whether it's good progress or
yeah.
bad progress, I think that's still in the wind. But I think this is something that's moving, and I don't think it's gonna vanish, right? Um,
Oh no.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, more power to those educators out there that are teaching the future, children that are coming in, and eventually some of them will be in tech, So it's, yeah, it's amazing to see all the yeah, different ways that everything's evolving.
yeah.
So
Courtney, this has
yeah.
been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and talk to me about your history. And
Yeah,
I think
thank
that you
you.
have a very unique voice. I think a lot of people that are in DevRel, they come from just another
Hmm.
area of tech, and a lot of people don't
Yeah.
come at it from like this deep rooted learning or want to teach and want to educate. And
Yeah.
I'm just really glad that you found DevRel because I think that you know we need more people like you in this space that really have empathy for people that want to learn. Which
Awesome.
which is
Yeah.
which is great. And for folks that want to follow along with what Courtney is doing, there's a bunch of different places online. One place is Blue Sky.
Hmm.
C Yatteau. So CYATTEAU dot BSKY dot social. So just basically search for
Hmm.
her on Blue Sky. Those would be some other links as
Yeah.
well to some different places that you can find her as well. Before we sign off, my friend, do you have any parting words?
Well, I mean, just yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun to just yeah talk about the past and how I got into the space that I'm in now. I hope that others can maybe be inspired by some of this potentially. That you never know where your life is going to take you. Just keep learning. Like I said earlier, be a lifelong learner. Don't be afraid to just jump into something new maybe and see what you can build from there. So yeah.
I love it. And I also want to thank you for being very
Awesome.
patient with the fact that been staring at my solid face for the last 40 minutes. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's okay.
absolutely brutal. But I want to thank you again for everything. I want to thank the folks for tuning in live and the folks that are listening to this in the future. So my name is Isaac Levin.
Yeah,
This has been Coffee and Open Source, and for my friend Courtney Yatteau. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. Take care.
thank you.